This next section describes the amazing molecule ATP. ATP is what powers cellular work, and ATP couples exergonic to endergonic reactions. There are three main types of chemical work that happens in a cell, and it's important that you know all of these. The first kind of work is chemical work, the second is transport work, and the third is mechanical. And in order to do work, cells couple the energy resources using energy coupling. So they use exergonic processes, which give off ATP, to drive endergonic reactions, which need ATP. And the molecule that mediates this is ATP. So let's review the structure of ATP. ATP, also known as adenosine triphosphate, is the cell's energy shuttle. When you look at the structure of it, it looks very much like a nucleotide. It consists of a nitrogen base, adenine. It consists of a ribose sugar. Note the presence of the hydroxyl group here on carbon number 2, which makes it more like RNA than DNA. And then attached on the 5 carbon are 3 phosphate groups. These 3 phosphate groups are what gives ATP its ability to store energy, because you can see we've got 3 negative oxygens on this group, and these oxygens are actually pushing against each other. So the bond that forms between these individual phosphates is actually a strong bond to hold it together. If we want to release the energy stored in this bond, the process is called hydrolysis. Remember, hydrolysis is when you add a water molecule in order to break something down. Lysis means to break. And so here we go from ATP to ADP. In the process, we release an inorganic phosphate, and we also release some energy. And that energy is going to be used for cellular work. Pause for a moment and review this slide, reading over each of the different parts of ATP. What I like about it is this analogy that ATP is like a spring, a compressed spring, got the ability in it to release that energy as you let that spring grow. When we move phosphates around a cell, the process is called phosphorylation. And so we'll go into this more and more as we study the cell. So ATP is actually used for cellular work, and let's look at those 3 different types of cellular work. Overall, this reaction, when you're releasing the energy from ATP, it's an exergonic reaction. So here's an example of chemical work, the first type of work done in a cell. If we want to make glutamic acid into glutamine by the addition of ammonia, it actually needs energy involved. Phosphate is added onto the glutamic acid. This is what we call the phosphorylation intermediate. By adding that higher phosphate on, it allows so when you actually put energy into the you need 7.2 kilocalories per mole. ATP, negative 7.3 kilocalorie per mole of energy is released. And so the net change in delta G is negative, making this a nice spontaneous reaction overall. The second kind of work a cell does is transport. Think of the membranes we drew last time. Here is your transport protein. When that protein gets phosphorylated by using ATP, the phosphate comes from the ATP, it gets attached onto this molecule, which is a protein. The attachment of that phosphate causes the protein to change shape, and then the solute gets transported out of the cell. When that is in this altered shape, the inorganic phosphate is then released. So the net product of this reaction is an ADP plus an inorganic phosphate. The other example of transport of work in a cell is when we do actual physical mechanical work. So consider a muscle or consider a motor protein. And I showed you examples of our vesicles filled with proteins walking down microtubules in a cell. And in order for those microtubules to move, energy is used. So the ATP is used to aid the movement of these vesicles down their cytoskeletal tract. So make sure you understand the 3 different types of work that is done in a cell. And this last slide actually shows that coupling reaction. So in order for cells to work, we need energy from catabolism, where the energy is actually released and stored in ATP, and then we hydrolyze our ATP, and the energy that is released is used for cellular work. And this cellular work is examples of cellular work are endergonic reactions, where we need energy in order for them to happen. And what happens is when that energy is released from the ATP, we produce ADP plus an inorganic phosphate, and the cycle can keep starting over again. So the only place in a cell where ADP is produced and turned into ATP is when we have energy from catabolism that is available. And you will learn about an amazing molecule called ATP synthase, which is where you actually make ATP in one of the places in the mitochondrial inner membrane. So quickly see if you can answer these questions. What is ATP? What biological molecule is ATP most similar to, and can you guess why? Describe the 3 types of cellular work, and explain the relationship of ATP to exergonic and endergonic reactions.